brief, can you walk us through your experience in detention? I mean, what were the conditions like? And how did it shape your perspective on Nigeria's justice system?
Here's the thing. I promised my cellmates and fellow prisoners that whenever I got around to talking about my time in prison, it was only ever going to be talked about in comical terms. And that's actually very deliberate, because there is nothing about prison that is anything short of tragic, especially the Nigerian prison. So if I begin to treat the Nigerian prison as an issue, and I begin to talk about, if I speak to my own experience, there will be a little bit of fraudulence there, because I wasn't your average prisoner. So if I'm beginning to talk to the Nigerian prison system, I will be largely fictional. Fictional in the sense that I would have to be speaking to the experiences of others, and that is why it's best I dealt with it only in the most comical of terms, even though it is a tragicomedy. The system is not fit for human beings. The Nigerian prison system is not in any way, shape or form reformatory. It is actually even worse than punishment. The average Nigerian prisoner who is dependent on prison rations will be dead in 3 months. And that is no hyperbole, it's just fact. 3 months at most, he will be dead. He will be dead due to one opportunistic disease or the other, or he will die of malnutrition. It's that simple. I am grateful to God that I didn't have to eat the food. I didn't even have to taste it. So I was privileged. I am blessed not to have to deal with the reality of being where I was. So I wouldn't be the right person to speak to what Nigerian prison conditions are like. I wasn't offered or given any extra privileges of any sort, but I was self-feeding. So I didn't have to deal with that. And Yorùbá will say, I didn't have to suffer the pains of incarceration and then deal with the pangs of hunger or deprivation of any sort. I saw prison officers just spending their own money to buy medicine for prisoners. Are those the people I want to be criticizing? The people within the system, the officers themselves, mostly, not all, but mostly pristine human beings, probably better than most of us out here. And I'll say the same for some of the prisoners themselves. But we all live in one big fat prison anyway, so, but I'm not qualified to talk about Nigerian prisons.
Now, what kept you going during your time in detention? I mean, there are moments when you questioned your quest to fight for justice.
T. Gomez, let me put it this way. I waited all of 40 years for the moment that happened. I had pictured that moment in my head all through my teenage years as I grew up, and I was more interested in finding how I measured up against what I had imagined all the times that I had waited for it to happen. You don't confront an evil system such as the world in which we live without expecting pushbacks and repercussions, and I've suffered a few over the years. But this particular one, let's just say that I am grateful to God that when the moment came, I was prepared for the moment. So I didn't have any moment where I was racked with any doubt of any kind. I knew I was going to come out. I knew that the prison was not going to be able to hold me. What I didn't know was that I would come out so quickly. I went in believing that I would not come out until like February. As bad as the system is, I was certain that no matter how much the system might be abused, I would get bail at some point. So I was already expecting. I told even my abductors, I told them, I'm sure I'll be out of your care by February. I told my wife, I told the lawyers, I told my friend, I told everybody who cared to listen. People who cared about me sufficiently to be worried about my well-being. I told them, don't worry, I'll be out of here by February. So by the time I was coming out, I was projecting 3 months. Because of the fact that Nigerians invested themselves in me, I came out in 3 weeks. Instead of 3 months, it took 3 weeks. Exactly 21 days, and I was expecting 90 days. So who am I to complain? But it was a good time to be away from the hustle and bustle of Lagos. I enjoyed the sedate environment of Ekiti, even though it wasn't my will, but it was quite an experience and I enjoyed myself.
Do you see any parallels between your detention and the experiences of other political prisoners in Nigeria?
I wasn't a political prisoner. I wasn't a political prisoner. I don't believe myself to be a political prisoner. The system would have to decide what I was. I didn't go to prison on a political charge. I was taken before 2 courts. Before the magistrate court, I was charged with specific crimes. Criminal defamation. Whether the crime exists in the law books of Ekiti State or not, that's another ball game entirely. It wasn't political. By the time they took me to the Federal High Court, it became cyber crime. So I wasn't political. Somebody like Dele, for instance, who shouted revolution now and he got hauled into detention, that is political. So I wasn't in detention, I was in prison. So be careful to distinguish the two. I went through a process, whether it is now the due process or not, whether it was a legitimate process or not, whether it was the lawful process or not, that's another ball game entirely. But I wasn't a political prisoner.
Some may really object to that, considering the fact that the basis for all of this persecution you experienced was the book you wrote on the criminal justice system.
My book wasn't political. My book wasn't political. I wrote a book about the realities of what I have seen within the Nigerian society.
But Dave, that clearly mirrored the entirety of the criminal justice system
here is
in
the
country.
How people elect to interpret the book. I was hoping, and I'm still hoping, that the book would spark some sort of reform within the judicial system. I still retain the hope that even those who rejoice at my incarceration would find sufficient humanity to realize that if it is tolerated in relation to A, then it becomes legalized against B, C, D, E, and F. And you know, the thing about endorsing oppression is that, you know, when you're at the beach and you're busy peeing on top of a crab, and then the wind direction shifts, you find that you're peeing on yourself, even though it was a poor little crab that you started out peeing on. That is what happens when you endorse oppression. So frankly, I don't see what I have done as a political action. I believe what I have done is to bear witness as a citizen. The fact that we have become so Philistinic and we don't read, and even when we read, our biases have turned us into people who subjectivize the truth. So if it is the truth in relation to A, it might no longer be the truth in relation to B, simply because you like B, or B speaks your language, or you worship in the same church, or you are in the same mosque. So all I have done is to put a mirror in front of the judiciary. It wasn't about persons. That's why I'm very careful to point out that I wasn't a political prisoner. It is about a system that is structured to permit abuses, structured to administer impunity. And you know, Yorubas have this thing. Olode, olosoko operan, oniko ribe, odele, ewure nku lotun, adie nku losi. If what I wrote in the book are lies, what I have experienced, are they lies?
Considering your experience, some critics have looked at it that seems Nigerian elites, criminal elites so to speak, are weaponizing the justice by using the legal system in order to silence dissent. Do you believe that?
The Nigerian legal system is not structured to deliver justice. Institutionally, it is actually incapable of delivering justice. And it is not its fault. It is a function of a structuring and the purpose to which it is pressed. Purpose almost always determines design. If a system is designed to deliver justice, the process of appointment into judicial offices would not be what it currently is. Judicial positions have become essentially hereditary. It is the children of retired justices or serving justices, and it reached its apogee during the years of Kayode Ariwoola. The level of nepotism that riddles the Nigerian judiciary today guarantees that it cannot do justice. It has become essentially prebendal. Rub my back, I rub your back. Bokachua gave us an insight into how judicial decisions were reached. And when you look at these various judicial somersaults that has taken place in our space, it is, look, if we're ever going to save our country, at some point we are going to have to tell ourselves that we must fix the judiciary.
Talking about the systemic rots, what does your detention, reveal?
Stop calling it detention. I refuse to allow. No, see, I am big on linguistic exactitude. If I was in detention, I might have been in a police cell somewhere, in a DSS facility somewhere, in a DMI facility somewhere. I was not in detention. It wasn't a political, it wasn't even Tinubu.
So
I was imprisoned, and somebody will still explain the basis of my imprisonment. So it wasn't detention. Maybe a day will come when they would elevate me to Yele status and start detaining me. But this one, I was a prisoner.
So the fact that you were a prisoner,
yeah.
What does it reveal about the state of law enforcement, considering the process you had to go through? You were abducted, and moved to a different state, a different jurisdiction. The entire process itself. What does it reveal about the state of law enforcement and judiciary in Nigeria? In brief, sir.
When I was picking the title for the book itself, a lot of people don't. There is a play on word in that title. Nigeria and its criminal justice system. The reality is that it is the justice system itself that has become criminal. It has taken the justice system becoming criminal for Nigeria to become the perverse place it has become today. Our judicial system, it's not just the judge. It begins with law enforcement. If I had a dispute with you here in Lagos, and you reside here in Lekki Phase 1 where you are interviewing me, and you were going to come and you report to the police in Lekki Phase 1, and they were going to come to my house at Chevron within the same Lekki to arrest me, they would go to the police station closest to my house and they would document the fact that they had there is an arrest warrant and they were coming to pick me up. But this time around, policemen left Ekiti State. They crossed 6 state lines. They abducted me. I was sat in this very seat, and I was abducted from my office with my staff serially assaulted, slapped, punched, elbowed on camera by men who could not have been said to be uniformed. And I was taken in a private bus. These policemen were accompanied by a private security guard. He was one of those who assaulted my staff on camera. What kind of law enforcement is that? Even if I had committed a crime for which I must be arrested, is that how arrests are carried out? And then I was hauled before a magistrate. I will not speak to that charge for now, for multiple reasons. Because one thing you can take for granted is that some people would have to explain what took place. So when you speak to law enforcement, the entire process has been criminalized.